I was the one who spotted the first crack beneath Ian Rothschild's flawless mask. The secret photos, along with that very specific gift, were laid out in front of him, impossible to deny. Faced with my command, Ian had no choice but to swallow the humiliation and obey me. After a while, I grew bored with the game. I tossed him the key to the handcuffs and turned away, already hunting for my next target. That was when Ian, his eyes burning red, dragged me back to the secluded villa. The familiar black leather choker curled around his fingers. In the darkness, the bell chimed with every step closer. The game starts again. Nora, now we switch roles. I discovered Ian Rothschild's secret. Sunlight from the windows washed over his profile, perfect in a way that felt almost sculpted, like something carved out of Greek marble. He was standing in the academy hallway, patiently answering what was clearly a freshman's foolish question. His posture was relaxed, his tone gentle, every inch the model senior. The girl looked up at him with pure devotion in her eyes, the kind of awe reserved for something unreachable, like staring straight at a distant star. I recognized that look immediately. I used to wear it too. But now, watching Ian behind that carefully constructed mask of warmth, my entire body trembled with excitement. I adjusted the heavy black-rimmed glasses on my nose, letting the shadow hide half my face, becoming invisible again. The moment the girl turned and walked away, I caught it. The exact second Ian's expression dropped, the temperature on his face plunging to absolute zero. Perfect. Evidence +1. My encrypted cloud drive was already packed with photos like this, neatly catalogued, quietly damning. Just then, my phone lit up with a delivery notification. I stared at the message, anticipation curling in my stomach as I imagined the moment this untouchable golden boy would receive his gift. I couldn't wait to see what expression would crack that noble, immaculate face. My naive crush on Ian ended a week ago. That was the day I accidentally witnessed the cheer captain confessing to him. She was the goddess of the entire campus, yet in front of Ian, she looked small, almost childlike, desperately seeking approval. As expected, Ian rejected her with flawless courtesy. "Thank you for your feelings, but all my focus needs to be on my studies and fraternity business right now. I'm sorry. I'll treasure this letter." As St. Jude University's crown jewel and the heir to the Rothschild family, Ian was always like this, polished, composed, a diplomat trained never to embarrass anyone. I was leaning quietly behind the narrow door of the janitor's closet, feeling both relieved and inexplicably sad, a familiar ache of knowing my place. Then I heard it. A soft, contemptuous scoff. Without understanding why, I froze and pulled my hand back from the door. Through the thin crack, I peeked out. Ian was still there. But his signature gentle smile was gone. In its place was something chilling, cold, stripped of warmth, edged with disgust, as if he'd just encountered something filthy. He lowered his gaze, pinching the corner of the envelope with 2 fingers, like it carried a deadly infection. He walked to the recycling bin at the end of the hall and tossed the letter inside, as casually as throwing away a dirty tissue. Then, without hesitation, he pulled out a bottle of hand sanitizer and meticulously wiped his fingers. Every movement was precise. Efficient. Cruel beyond belief. The sunset reflected in his bottomless black eyes. There was no trace of human emotion in them, only a dead, silent abyss. That look didn't belong to the perfect Ian. In that moment, my blood seemed to rush backward, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Ian. So this was your flawless elite persona." A mask, carefully designed to hide the arrogance, the coldness, the rot underneath. And honestly? It was incredible. Like a hunter finally discovering the fatal weakness of a beast. I bit down on my fingernail, delirious with joy, screaming silently inside that cramped space, terrified that if I laughed out loud, Ian would hear me. I've always known I'm not a good person. Mediocre grades. A face no one remembers. Someone who only squeezed into this circle of wealth by clinging to a full scholarship. Thick glasses hid most of my face. And hid those feelings for Ian that were not only unspeakable, but borderline sick. sticky, shadowed desires. And sometimes, just for a flash. The thought that if I couldn't have him, I'd rather destroy him. At last, I'd found an outlet. To hell with one-sided crushes. Right now, the only thing filling my mind was how to tame Ian Rothschild. Yes. Tame him. I wanted to tear off the mask of this sanctimonious fraud, drag him down from his shining pedestal, and make those eyes, so carefully crafted to look affectionate yet utterly empty, show something real. Only for me. Even if that truth was hatred. Humiliation. Once the thought took root, it spread through my mind like wild vines. I spent the next 3 months of living expenses on a professional camera with a long-range lens. And I began to drift through Ian's world like a ghost, appearing, by accident, of course, wherever he appeared. Thanks to my completely forgettable face, Ian never noticed me. Not once. Through the lens, I collected more and more fragments of the other Ian. In empty corners, rubbing his brow, his face dark with a violence barely contained. When fraternity pledges tried too hard to please him, the flash of pure impatience in his eyes. And again, him tossing aside cheap gifts with the same disgust one might reserve for radioactive waste. A week later came the private gathering of the Order's core members. The venue was a members-only rooftop lounge downtown. As usual, Ian was the last to leave. Everyone assumed he was being responsible, checking that everyone got home safely, settling the bill. I knew better. He just found them too loud. After a night soaked in false smiles and hollow conversation, he needed a few minutes, just a few, to strip off the perfect mask. I waited at the corner of the deserted street he had to pass on his way back to campus. In the dead of night, there was nothing but my increasingly frantic heartbeat. And the steady, expensive sound of leather shoes striking pavement, drawing closer. The streetlight stretched Ian's shadow long across the stained brick wall. I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and planted my foot hard on that shadow. Ian Rothschild. I blocked his path and caught the split second his brow tightened. The faint scent of bourbon whiskey lingered in the air. It was a freezing early winter night. And yet my entire body burned, blood surging through me like molten lava. "Excuse me, can I help you?" The distance in Ian's eyes vanished in an instant. His lips curved into that perfectly measured smile as he spoke in his usual warm, magnetic voice. Polite. Approachable. Impeccable. He had completely forgotten that we'd already crossed paths on campus once. For some reason, that irritated me. I decided that later, I'd pick out a few more new toys for this noble young master. "I have a gift for you," I said. After I added that it wasn't anything expensive, Ian finally extended his hand, his watch catching the streetlight as he took the beautifully wrapped box from me. "What's your name?" he asked smoothly. "And your major?" "Nora. Literature." After a few polite exchanges, Ian gallantly offered to call me a car, or walk me part of the way. "It's late," he said. "This area isn't very safe. A girl shouldn't be out here alone." As if anyone could be more dangerous than me. I almost laughed. Especially knowing that while he spoke with such considerate concern, his mind was probably cursing me as a nuisance wasting his precious time. I couldn't stop the smile that tugged at my lips. "No need. I don't live on campus. My place is just up ahead." I pointed toward an aging apartment building that looked painfully out of place among the sleek, upscale blocks around it. After saying goodnight, I suddenly turned back. "Oh, Ian." I met his eyes, the ones now carefully arranged into a look of mild confusion. As casually as if making small talk, I added, "The gift, don't secretly toss it into the trash again. Otherwise, you'll regret it. I don't think I'll ever forget that night." The moment the mask labeled gentle froze on Ian's face, then cracked. Shock. Disbelief. And a flicker of panic, the kind that comes from realizing a secret has been seen by someone you consider beneath you. It all exploded in his rapidly shrinking pupils, more dazzling than fireworks. The friend request on social media came faster than I expected. I took my time. Had a long hot shower. Put on a face mask. Only half an hour later did I calmly tap accept. I changed his contact name to Puppy. At the top of the chat window, typing, flashed again and again, betraying his anxiety. In the end, though, the elite heir managed only a few cold words. Name your price. Even through the screen, I could picture him in his mansion, loosening his tie, brow furrowed in irritation. Did you like the gift I gave you? I asked, completely ignoring his attempt to negotiate. He replied with a line of ellipses. What do you want? His frustration made my imagination run wild, him opening that exquisite box, staring at its contents, struggling to keep his expression under control. I couldn't help laughing out loud. I sent him a location pin. Along with my very first order. Tomorrow night. 6 o'clock. Come find me here. If you don't show up, those photos will be emailed directly to every member of the Board of Trustees. And to your father's very strict secretary. Oh, and one more thing. My fingers flew over the screen as I made sure to emphasize it. Remember to wear the gift I gave you. The next day, Ian showed up right on time at the entrance of my crumbling apartment building. A white dress shirt. Impeccably tailored dark slacks. Fresh from a fraternity meeting, he still carried that sharp, authoritative air of a leader who was used to being obeyed. Only the faint shadows beneath his eyes betrayed how badly he'd slept. He pressed his lips together and followed me inside without a word. In my cramped, cluttered living room, he looked painfully out of place, like something expensive dropped into the wrong setting. Once we sat across from each other, he skipped the pleasantries and slid a thick envelope across the table. Nora Cotton. 20 years old. Single-parent household. Raised by your grandmother. After your grandmother passed away last year, she left you this old apartment in the East District. Ian paused, his critical gaze sweeping over a space that wasn't even the size of his walk-in closet. When he spoke again, his tone carried more confidence, that familiar sense of control returning. There's enough cash in that envelope to pay off the rest of your student loans. Once you delete every copy of those photos in front of me, I'll add another check. $100,000. And if you want, my lawyer can arrange internship referrals at several major firms. The pay would be generous. Maybe he'd worn the act for too long, because that signature, practiced smile crept back onto his face. He tried to overwhelm me with his magnanimity, with money, with favors, like a benevolent savior redeeming a misguided extortionist. I didn't respond. I just stared at his bare neck. And cut off his self-satisfied negotiation. Ian. Where's the gift I gave you? What? He froze for a moment. Following my gaze, his hand instinctively went to his throat, as if a nauseating memory had just surfaced. His face flushed, then drained of color. I threw it away, he said coldly, disgust unmistakable in his eyes. That kind of trash doesn't belong anywhere near me. Of course. I knew Ian wouldn't behave. Good thing I came prepared. Then pick one now. I pulled open the drawer beneath the coffee table. Where random clutter used to be, rows of chokers now lay neatly arranged. Metal chains. Black leather. Velvet ribbons. From minimalist restraint to openly provocative designs, every style imaginable. You, fuck. Ian shot up from the uncomfortable sofa, the movement sharp and uncontrolled. Whether it was anger or shame, the heat flooding his face spread all the way down into the open collar of his shirt. I'll give you 1 minute, I said lightly. If you can't choose, you'll wear this one. I deliberately pointed to the most outrageous piece, the one studded with sharp metal spikes. He glanced at it once and jerked his eyes away like he'd been burned. 59. 58. 57. Ian glared at me, his chest heaving, like he might lunge across the room and strangle me at any second. Are you out of your mind? He snapped, all elegance completely gone. But I knew. This was the real Ian Rothschild. The furious, volatile soul trapped beneath that flawless shell. I smiled and kept counting. 18. 17. 16. Humiliation. Rage. Defiance. They crashed through his beautiful eyes like tidal waves. He lowered his gaze, forced to look at the neatly arranged chokers. His hands at his sides clenched until his knuckles went white, veins standing out sharply. He hesitated. He struggled. Or rather, the proud heir was calculating which one might allow him to keep the last shred of his ridiculous dignity. 3. 2. 1. Just as my fingers were about to land on the most obscene, spike-studded collar, my wrist was seized hard. Nora. Ian ground my name out through clenched teeth. The violence in his eyes looked sharp enough to carve me apart. Ian, I said calmly, it's 6:30. I set up an automatic email. 3 minutes from now. If your father and the board see those photos, how long do you think your perfect heir status will last? Time bled away in suffocating silence. The air felt frozen solid. Ian finally broke. The fire in his eyes died instantly, as if doused with liquid nitrogen, leaving only a dull, ashen emptiness behind. He shut his eyes in despair and released my wrist. Second row. Fourth one. The words scraped out of his throat like sandpaper. You take it. I'll let you put it on. I glanced at his choice. A minimalist black leather choker. No extra decoration. Subtle, yet charged with a restrained, ascetic sensuality. I didn't move. I only raised an eyebrow. Ian shot me a resentful glare. Then, under my silent insistence, he slowly bent his back, the spine that was always ramrod straight, as if bearing the weight of his family's glory. Those hands that signed multi-million-dollar contracts now trembled as they reached into the drawer. When his fingertips touched the cold leather, his whole body stiffened, like he'd brushed against a venomous snake. He clenched the black choker in his fist, as if trying to crush it. Or as if it were the only thing holding his collapsing world together. I watched the humiliation burn red at the corners of his eyes. Watched the color drain from his thin lips. The dark desire coiled inside me found a satisfaction unlike anything before. I stepped closer and lightly tapped the back of the hand gripping the choker. Sit. Ian stiffly perched on the edge of the sofa. The black choker slid slowly around his long, pale neck. Click. The metal clasp snapped shut behind his throat, locking in place. Cough, it's too tight. As I deliberately tightened my fingers, Ian was forced to tilt his head back, his exposed Adam's apple struggling beneath the black leather. Are you trying to strangle me? His fingers clawed uselessly at the edge of the collar, fighting for a little air. Tears welled instinctively, staining the corners of his eyes a deeper red. It made me want to break him even more. I traced the rigid line of his jaw, the muscle hard beneath my touch from how tightly he was clenching his teeth. I raised my wrist, the one he'd bruised, right in front of his eyes. You hurt me just now, Ian. This is your punishment. He turned his head away and muttered, deserve it. I smiled, unconcerned. Then I took out my phone and, right in front of him, canceled the scheduled email. Then. Click. I took a photo of Ian Rothschild exactly as he was in that moment. The untouchable elite, wearing a collar that symbolized submission, tears clinging to the corners of his eyes, humiliation written all over his face. Sick freak. His face burned red again with shame and fury. He shoved me away, hands shaking as he struggled to fasten the top button of his shirt. But beneath the pristine white custom fabric, the black choker was still faintly visible. Like a hidden brand. A mark that invited imagination. Catching my unrestrained gaze, Ian let out a cold scoff. He was just about to spit something vicious to reclaim control when an abrupt knock at the door cut him off. Nora? Are you home? The air froze. Ian's pupils shrank instantly. The color drained from his face, turning the earlier flush into a sickly white. He stared at me in disbelief, real panic finally surfacing in his eyes. He knew that voice. It was Sean, his right-hand man, and his closest friend in the fraternity. Sean was also my direct senior, the one who had recommended me for the elite internship program. After watching me search the living room for ages without finding the document that needed signing, Sean glanced at the tightly closed bedroom door and asked casually, "Did you leave it in the bedroom?" "Huh? That's actually possible." I smiled at him and walked toward the door. My hand wrapped around the round doorknob and pressed down gently. I immediately felt resistance from the lock mechanism. Someone inside was bracing the door with all their strength. "Oh, wait." I froze mid-motion. The moment I released the handle, it snapped back into place. "I remember now," I said lightly. "It should be in the drawer under the TV cabinet." 2 minutes later, Sean had my application materials in hand. He scratched his head, frowning slightly as he looked over the form. "Nora, with your GPA and resume, getting into a management track internship won't be a problem at all. But, you applied for executive assistant to the president. I remember Ian saying he doesn't want an assistant. He hates having people around him. How about switching departments? PR, maybe?" "It's fine, Sean. Just submit it for me." I smiled, slow and deliberate. The president might not have needed one before, but maybe now, he suddenly does. Seeing that I wouldn't budge, Sean shrugged. He probably just assumed I was another crazy girl trying to get close to Ian. He raised an eyebrow, took the documents, and left. Once the sound of the apartment door locking echoed through the room. I slowly walked up to the bedroom door. The moment I turned the handle, a violent force yanked me inside. My back slammed against the door with a loud bang. Ian pinned me there. Hot rage spilled across my face with his breath. "Nora. You did that on purpose, didn't you?" Like interrogating a criminal, he trapped my wrists with one hand, forcing them above my head against the door. I struggled once or twice. Didn't move an inch. So I leaned forward instead, pressing myself against his violently rising chest. "On purpose?" I blinked innocently. I really forgot where the document was. This place is so small, after all. "Not like your house." "Bullshit." Ian snapped, finally swearing out loud. His face flushed crimson as he abruptly yanked himself away from me. As if he'd forgotten about the choker around his neck. Irritated and restless, he roughly undid the top button he'd just fastened, desperate for air. Watching me panic like a clown, does that really amuse you that much? I wasn't sure if the collar was simply too tight. Or if Ian's skin was just overly sensitive. The faint red ring blooming around the black leather caught my eye, and my gaze darkened. In the brief moment his anger made him careless. I slipped free from his grip. My fingertips brushed lightly over the overheated mark at his throat. "Yes," I said softly. "I like teasing you. Watching you tense up. Watching you get scared. Watching you leave marks on yourself because of me." The skin beneath my fingers shuddered. Ian froze completely. A hidden tremor, like a weak current, ran from my cool fingertips straight through my body. I paused. Because we were standing so close, my thigh accidentally brushed against the taut fabric of his dress pants. The sensation felt wrong. I glanced down. What I saw nearly made me laugh out loud. "Ian, Sr.," I murmured, studying the once pristine elite now in utter disarray. I clicked my tongue inwardly. Damn. Who knew the temper wasn't the only thing he had in excess? "So that's what you like. Nora." Ian clearly realized the shameful, uncontrollable change in his own body. He shoved me away hard. Like I was something contaminated. Staggering back, his face filled with panic and raw humiliation, the look of someone whose last card had just been exposed. "Did I hit the mark?" I smiled, stepping closer. My voice turned slow, sticky, coaxing. "You like this feeling, don't you? Being controlled." "Shut up." Ian snarled. Yet in those once arrogant eyes flickered something close to collapse, confusion, stripped bare. He couldn't stay another second. He yanked open the bedroom door and stormed out, forgetting his coat entirely. "Don't forget to approve my assistant application," I called after him calmly. His hurried figure froze. He didn't turn around. His voice was tight with humiliation and bitter irony. "What makes you think I'd agree?" "Ian," I said, stepping up behind him, rising onto my toes. My breath brushed against his burning red ear. "Have you not adjusted to your new role yet? You're my puppy now. And of course, an owner needs to keep an eye on whether her dog is behaving." I pressed a light kiss, through the white collar of his shirt, right over the choker at the back of his neck. Ian's body jolted. The red at his ears spread rapidly down his neck. He didn't hesitate again. He fled. So fast he didn't even dare glance back at me. The apartment door slammed shut with enough force to rattle the walls. I touched the lingering warmth at the corner of my lips. Thinking of the stiff, awkward way he'd walked toward the elevator, limbs completely out of sync. A slow, satisfied pleasure rose in my chest. My puppy didn't seem to hate me quite as much as he claimed. Ian gave in. And just like that, I walked straight into the order's office. The very symbol of ultimate power on campus. As the newly appointed executive assistant to the president. After that, black turtleneck cashmere sweaters, or crisp dress shirts buttoned all the way to the collar, became Ian's unshakable uniform. Even with the central heating blasting indoors, he wrapped himself up tightly, sealed off like a disciplined monk. "Ian, why have you been wearing turtlenecks all the time lately?" Sean sidled up to him, waggling his eyebrows, a football spinning lazily in his hand. "Don't tell me, you've got a hickey on your neck?" "Damn, what kind of girl leaves marks like that?" The perfect curve of Ian's smile froze. A flicker of panic flashed through his eyes as he instinctively tugged at his collar. "Don't be ridiculous," he said lightly, brushing Sean off with practiced ease, restoring that polished leader persona. But beneath the calm tone was a faint tremor, one only I could hear. "Mr. President, the agenda for this weekend's charity banquet needs your signature." "Leave it there." "Ian, for this afternoon's board presentation, there are a few slides that need data adjustments." "Tell me." To everyone else, Ian and I looked like an efficient but distant superior and subordinate. All business. Minimal words. Every time, he made a point of avoiding eye contact with me for more than 3 seconds. And yet, I always found ways to slip past his defenses beneath the cover of the desk. When I handed him documents, my fingertips would accidentally brush the back of the hand gripping his Mont Blanc pen. When I briefed him, I'd lean in just slightly, my hair grazing his taut forearm, carrying a whisper of perfume. My gaze lingered, deliberately, unapologetically. On the line of his neck, tightly wrapped in expensive fabric. A silent reminder that beneath those layers, something was locked away. A secret that belonged only to the two of us. And against my brand of workplace harassment, Ian had no defense at all. He would sit rigid in that oversized leather chair, his straight back trembling almost imperceptibly. His Adam's apple worked beneath the collar, struggling as if an invisible hand were choking off his breath. My teasing grew bolder by the day. Ian's mental defenses began to crack. And that fragile, dangerous balance finally shattered at the Rothschild family's annual charity gala. As the heir, and the event's host, Ian had no choice but to attend this gathering of elites. The night before, an iMessage popped up on my phone. A demand to remove the choker for the evening. The stiff wording, clinging desperately to the last scraps of authority, made me laugh. "Take it off. Just for tonight. Not a chance." I replied, adding that as his special assistant, I would be present the entire night to assist, monitor, him. Ian understood the threat. He didn't reply again. The next evening, when Ian appeared in the ballroom in a custom black tailcoat, heads immediately turned. With a face sculpted like a divine masterpiece and the Rothschild name backing him, no one questioned why his black bow tie was perfectly knotted, yet his shirt collar was fastened far too tightly. Glasses clinked. Laughter flowed. Ian moved effortlessly among Wall Street tycoons and political heavyweights, every gesture elegant, composed. If anything, he seemed sharper than usual, decisive to the point of severity. As if venting all the pressure coiled inside him. I hadn't even finished admiring how captivating he looked, dancing in chains, when the accident happened. At the height of the evening, a board member's wife, too deep into her champagne, staggered as she turned. The red wine in her glass splashed violently toward Ian, right as he was mid-conversation. "Oh my God! Ian!" the woman cried out. Either to steady herself, or to help wipe the spill, she reached for his chest in a panic. Her fingers snagged his bow tie and collar and yanked downward. In that instant, several guests from the inner circle standing nearby, along with a server passing by with a tray, clearly saw it. Beneath Ian's snow-white shirt, a flash of black leather edged with a cold metallic gleam. The air seemed to freeze for a full second. Huh? What is that on Ian's neck? Wait, that looks like, is that a dog collar? No way. The Rothschild heir is into that kind of thing in private. Whispers buzzed like bees, jarringly loud against the elegant swell of the orchestra. Ian shot a hand up to cover his neck, his face draining to a deathly white. Instinctively, he looked past the crowd, beyond the sea of silk and perfume. Straight at me. In his eyes, a plea for help. And despair. For the rest of the evening, Ian moved like a sleepwalker, visibly shaken. After a brief, perfunctory speech, he ignored all attempts to stop him, all hollow courtesies, and bolted straight out of the ballroom. I immediately set down my champagne glass and lifted my skirt to follow. But the surge of guests flooding the dance floor slowed me down. I lost him completely. I called him on FaceTime. It rang once, then was cut off. I called again. Hung up again. After several tries, all that greeted me was the cold voice of voicemail. Had Ian blocked me? Send me your location. Otherwise, I'll send this high-definition close-up to the New York Post gossip desk and help everyone confirm what they just saw. The humiliating photo I'd taken that night, after he put on the choker, went out with the message. 5 minutes later, my screen lit up. Do whatever you want. Just a few words. Empty. Final. Like something had died after giving up the last struggle. My heart sank. An indescribable heaviness rose in my chest, clogging my breath. Tonight's accident hadn't been part of my plan. No one understood better than I did what that collar meant to Ian. Especially now, during a critical transfer of power within the family. If it was fully exposed, it would be catastrophic. A scandal. A fatal weakness. Proof enough to have him erased from the line of succession. But people say, to break something is sometimes the only way to rebuild it. Maybe this was the key God had handed me. The one that would pry open Ian's heart for good. Ian had forgotten something. I'd installed a family location share through his iCloud. The cursor blinked over a spot behind campus. The abandoned boathouse dock. The coldest, loneliest corner of the grounds. The first time I'd ever noticed Ian on campus. Had been near there too. I found myself dazed. Me and Ian Rothschild. Maybe we really were bound by something twisted. Late autumn. Deep night. The wind off the lake cut like knives, fog curling low over the water. Ian sat alone at the edge of the wooden pier. His expensive tailcoat lay discarded on the dirty ground beside him. The thin shirt clung to his slightly hunched back, whipped tight by the cold. The man who was always immaculate, brilliant, untouchable, now looked shattered. Fragile. Alone. Hearing the sound of heels on wood, Ian slowly turned his head. Moonlight revealed it was me. A flicker of raw embarrassment crossed his face. His reddened eyes glimmered, like cracked gemstones. Then, a few seconds later, everything drained away. Leaving only dead calm exhaustion. Bottomless numbness. Nora, he said quietly. Are you satisfied now? He tugged at the corner of his mouth in bitter mockery, his voice rough from hours of cold wind. I walked up to him in silence. Ignoring the dirt on the ground, I crouched down in front of him and looked up. No. I'm not satisfied. My fingertip brushed lightly against the reddened corner of his eye. Ian flinched, but for once, he didn't recoil in disgust. I never expected something like this to happen, I said honestly. Looking at him now, like someone standing at the edge of the end of the world, I felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Guilt. Ian, aren't you tired? I asked quietly. Tired of keeping that fake, perfect smile on your face every second of every day? Do you really care that much about how people look at the Rothschild name? His Adam's apple shifted beneath his collar, rolling with difficulty. Ian opened his mouth, as if to argue. But in the end, all that escaped was a short, self-mocking laugh. Do you remember last month, I continued, when Chad screwed up that fund project and you dropped him from the fraternity without hesitation? Think back to how that felt. Wasn't it better than the usual routine, being annoyed out of your mind, yet still smiling while you cleaned up that idiot's mess just to maintain the illusion of brotherhood? Chad was a deadweight in the fraternity, a rich second-generation screw-up who bought his way in with a donated building. Before, to preserve his image as a tolerant, flawless leader, Ian had handled Chad's drunk driving incidents and academic misconduct more times than anyone could count, always calm, always gracious. Then, a few days ago, Chad embezzled fraternity funds to gamble, nearly blowing a massive hole in the accounts. He came crawling back to Ian again, trying to guilt him with family connections. You made the mess. You fix it yourself. That's basic Wall Street logic, Chad. What are you, still on milk? Before Ian could even nod, I spoke up first, as his assistant. Chad's face darkened immediately. He pointed at me and snapped. Nora, I'm talking to Ian. What the hell does this have to do with you? You're just some poor scholarship kid. Who gave you the right to speak here? Enough. The cold voice cut straight through Chad's sneer. Ian frowned. For the first time in public, he slammed the folder down hard on the century-old oak table. Chad. If you can't fill this gap by tomorrow, you're out of the order for good. I'll personally inform your father. Ian? Chad stared at him, mouth hanging open, completely stunned. He couldn't process it. How could Ian, the always gentle, almost weak people-pleaser, turn on him so suddenly? That incident caused quite a stir in their circle. Sean even pulled me aside later, half joking, half serious, asking whether Ian had hit early midlife crisis, or been possessed by aliens. My words had clearly hit home. Ian fell silent. His dark eyes, unfocused, drifted toward the black surface of the lake. Feel better now? I asked softly. I reached out and, through the cold fabric of his shirt, gently pressed my finger against the choker at his throat. My wrist was grabbed suddenly. His palm was burning hot, but unlike before, the grip wasn't tight. It trembled, carrying a trace of dependence. Ian took a deep breath, like he was running out of strength. When he looked down at me, there was a flash of self-loathing in his eyes. Nora. You're wrong about one thing. I don't care what those idiots think. He paused, the words grinding out from the back of his teeth, laced with reckless frustration. I care about my dignity. This thing between you and me, this twisted relationship, do you think it's something to be proud of? Is it some achievement worth printing in Forbes? Watching him like this, resentful, awkward, clinging to the last scraps of aristocratic dignity while already standing in hell. I pressed my lips together, barely holding back a laugh. My fingertip lightly scratched the heat of his palm. The instant Ian tried to pull his hand back as if shocked, I tightened my grip instead, pressed my cheek against it, rubbing softly against the expensive cufflink. Got it. Our young master Ian needs his dignity. I leaned in, smiling with deliberate mischief. Warm breath brushed his cold, tightly sealed lips, chilled by the night wind. These dirty little secrets that can't see the light of day, I whispered, obviously have to be taken home, doors closed, handled in private. So. I looked straight at him and made my final invitation. Tonight, are you coming back to that broken-down apartment with me? Ian's ears flared red as if scorched. He turned his head sharply away, Adam's apple bobbing, dodging my invasive gaze. But he still refused to say a single word. The tension between us thickened in the cold night air, sticky enough to stretch. A gust of wind swept across the lake. I couldn't help sneezing. That finally broke his long silence. Don't you still have that bar shift tonight? He spoke at last, voice muffled. Lately, juggling the order's brutal workload and my 3 part-time jobs had left me running on fumes. Aside from teasing Ian at the office under the excuse of work, most nights I was too exhausted to do more than harass him one-sidedly on Snapchat after my shifts. Hearing this clumsy concern from him softened something in me. I lifted my hand and pinched his perfectly sculpted chin. Forced that half-resistant face to turn back toward me. Today, my puppy got scared. Making a little tip money, I murmured, is nowhere near as important as calming my dog. Our eyes locked. Ian froze completely. Shock. Confusion. And the sheer helplessness of being struck head-on by unexpected tenderness. It churned wildly in his beautiful, almond-shaped eyes. He forgot to pull away. Forgot to argue. Just stared at me, blankly. Time seemed to pause right there. Only our mingled breaths and heartbeats burned clear in the cold air. The apartment door closed behind us, sealing off the noisy world outside. I didn't turn on the lights. Using the faint neon glow filtering in through the window, I pressed Ian against the narrow wall of the entryway. My hand hooked into the collar of his couture shirt. The kind that took dozens of hours to tailor. In the dim light, the black choker gleamed with a cold, tempting sheen. Ian was forced to lower his head. I smiled, rose onto my toes, and kissed his still trembling lips. A muffled sound slipped from between us. Ian stood rigid, utterly at a loss. The hands hanging at his sides clenched, loosened. Then finally, hesitantly, tugged at the hem of my clothes near my waist. Go shower first? I whispered, brushing my thumb over his lips. As if burned, Ian shoved me away. Face blazing, he nearly fled into the cramped bathroom. After some time, the sound of running water finally stopped. A faint scent of cheap body wash. The kind he would never normally use, straight from a supermarket shelf. Mixed with the steam and drifted through the room. Ian came out, towel-drying his half-wet black hair. His eyes stayed down, not daring to look at me. A white towel was wrapped tightly around his waist. Clear droplets slid from his hair, tracing over the reddened skin near the choker. Across his solid chest, narrow waist. And finally disappearing along the sharp line of his V, vanishing into the shadow of the towel. I sat on the bed and patted the spot beside me. Come here. My voice was low. But in the quiet room, it rang unmistakably clear. An order that did not allow refusal. Ian's hand paused mid-motion as he dried his hair. He took a deep breath, like a martyr walking toward the execution block. After struggling for a few seconds, he finally obeyed, moving toward me one slow step at a time. I grabbed his wrist and leaned back in one smooth motion. Caught off guard, Ian lost his balance and fell with me. The moment his body sank into the soft mattress, he braced himself on his arms, barely keeping a sliver of distance, his face hovering beside my ear. Our rapid breaths tangled together, heat rising fast. In the moonlight, I could clearly see the desire spreading through Ian's eyes, the cool, restrained gaze now veiled in a sheen of moisture. Click. The crisp sound of metal snapping shut jolted him back to reality. Nora, what are you doing? He instinctively moved his right hand, only to realize his wrist was already locked in cold steel, the other end secured to the iron bars of the old-fashioned bed frame. Like he'd been struck by lightning, Ian stared wide-eyed at the handcuffs, my new toy, apparently hidden beneath the pillow. Your new gift, I said lightly. Do you like it? I rolled over and straddled his waist, looking down at him from above. My hand slid downward, unceremoniously pulling away the last bit of flimsy cover he had left. As expected, this young master was rather well endowed. But for a first time in this position. Behave. I shot a warning glance at Ian, who was struggling like a fish out of water. My grip tightened slightly. Why you, let go of me. A flush spread across his pale chest, blooming an enticing pink. Ian drew in a sharp breath, the words forced out through clenched teeth. Less an angry command. More a helpless plea. Ian, it's a long night. I removed the thick black-rimmed glasses from my nose and tossed them onto the nightstand. Leaning down, I brushed a fleeting kiss across his furrowed brow. Down his burning cheek. Until it stopped at his throat, where his Adam's apple bobbed nervously. I pressed my lips there, giving a light, teasing suck. MMPH. A broken, restrained sound spilled from his throat. His hoarse voice carried a trace of desperate restraint. Nora, stop. His scorching palm instinctively landed on my waist. His reason screamed at him to push me away. Yet his body betrayed him, tightening, pulling me closer. As if he wanted to fuse me into his very bones. So I deliberately stopped. I straightened, once again sitting astride his waist. I studied him calmly. Ian's chest rose and fell violently, sweat sliding along his collarbones. His misted eyes lost focus the instant I withdrew. He frowned without realizing it, the sudden emptiness making him lift his hips slightly. His low voice sounded less like protest. More like a soft, unconscious plea. Nora. My fingers traced upward along his chest. Hooked beneath the edge of the choker, tugging gently, forcing his head back. Mr. President. I made him look straight into my eyes, where my desire showed without disguise. With a half smile, I asked. Do you still want me to stop now? The night truly was long. Only, in the first half, it was me tormenting Ian alone. By the second half, somehow, this inexperienced young master seemed to awaken to something new. As if a hidden switch had been flipped. He turned the tables and left me thoroughly undone. Until dawn crept in. Nora, that day, why were you crying? Ian wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting in the hollow of my neck, asking suddenly. When I'd taken off my glasses the night before, he'd clearly frozen. I knew then, he'd recognized me. The first real intersection between Ian and me had happened a year ago, near that abandoned boathouse. He'd found me there, crying alone, and quietly handed me a handkerchief. If you're ever in trouble, you can come to the order, he'd said. We don't have the best reputation, but sometimes we can help. My name's Ian. Back then, the last light of sunset had traced the sharp line of Ian's profile. In that moment, I'd almost sworn I could hear my own heartbeat, loud enough to shake my ribs. Go make me something to eat, I said lazily. Then I'll tell you. My stomach betrayed me with an embarrassingly loud growl, yanking me out of the memory. I kicked Ian lightly, carelessly, like some heartless jerk who used people and tossed them aside, shooing him off the bed to make me a late-night snack, no, breakfast. Soon, the long-missed sound of sizzling butter drifted in from the kitchen. After my grandmother passed away, this apartment had been silent for far too long. It hadn't smelled like food, like life, in ages. 20 minutes later, Ian came back in with a plate. A hot grilled cheese sandwich, perfectly golden, with a small bowl of thick tomato soup beside it. Maybe it was exhaustion from the night before. Or maybe it was the smell. Either way, the crisp bread and melted cheese made my mouth water instantly. I was crying that day because my grandmother had just died, I said, cupping the warm bowl, my voice oddly calm, like I was talking about someone else. My dad's an asshole. My mom ran off years ago. My grandmother was the only family I had. I took a bite of the sandwich, and froze. The texture. The way it was cut. Ian. I didn't expect you to actually know how to cook. I kept my head down, hiding the flicker in my eyes. It's really good. But this grilled cheese is different. It's cut diagonally. Perfect triangles. I drew in a slow breath, my fingers unconsciously tracing the rim of the plate. When I was a kid, we were poor. We lived on food stamps. Those plastic-tasting cheap cheese slices were all we ever had. Only on my birthday would my grandmother splurge on real deli cheese, the kind that actually smelled like milk. She'd use a ridiculous amount of butter, fry the bread until both sides were golden, and then, very carefully, cut it into two perfect triangles. She told me triangle sandwiches tasted better than rectangles. That it was a special meal only I deserved. The box of memories creaked open. This was the first time I'd ever told anyone else about my grandmother. Ian sat quietly on the edge of the bed, listening. He didn't say things like "I'm sorry for your loss." He didn't offer hollow comfort. He just spoke when I was nearly done eating. "I'll make it for you," he said. I looked up. "What?" "Next time. With the best aged cheddar. Buttered properly. Fried until golden. Cut into perfect triangles." He said it carefully, deliberately. There was no pity in his eyes. Only something far more unsettling. Understanding. "I know it's not just about the cheese," he added. The warmth and ache in his gaze made my chest tighten, like a fine needle pricking straight through my heart. It didn't hurt. But it left behind a small, hollow space, and cold air rushed in. I lowered my head, staring at the crumbs left on the plate. Almost instinctively, like a defense mechanism, I lashed out. "What, sleep with me once and now you don't want to get rid of me anymore, Mr. Rothschild? Is this Stockholm Syndrome, or are you just addicted to my body?" The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. The air went painfully still. I didn't want to look up. Didn't want to see the expression I knew would be there. Until those long, calloused fingers reached out and took the empty plate from in front of me. "I'll wash the dishes," Ian said quietly, steadily. "If you're tired, go back to sleep." I watched his broad back disappear into the kitchen. For a moment, my mind went completely blank. Ian's sudden seriousness scared me more than any flirtation, more than any extravagant gift ever could. Because between him and me, it wasn't supposed to be like this. We weren't supposed to develop something so normal. Something that made my heart race, something completely out of my control. People say once is never just once. Ever since Ian and I crossed that final line. Maybe because men have some strange fixation on the first time. He stopped resisting my touch, and even my more excessive commands. As for the strange, questionable gifts I ordered online, he would grumble, "Nora, you're seriously twisted." Yet his body told a different story, half resistant, half yielding, lying on the bed with a flushed face, letting me do as I pleased. Our relationship slipped into a bizarre kind of harmony. On the surface, we looked almost like a deeply infatuated couple with very specific kinks. Until that afternoon. When my nightmare of a father suddenly appeared. And shattered that dreamlike life completely. Frank was waiting by the steps outside my apartment building, blocking my way as I came back from the grocery store. The moment he saw me, he demanded money, said he needed to borrow it to cover his gambling debts. "I don't have any." I shot him a disgusted look. A man who managed to combine alcoholism and gambling into one pathetic package. I didn't want to waste a single extra second on him. But Frank had clearly come prepared this time. When I tried to leave, he swore and lunged forward, grabbing my arm violently. Then raised his hand and slapped me hard across the face. "Fuck you. Don't think I don't know. I've been watching you for days. You've been hanging around some guy who drives a luxury car, his suit costs more than I've earned in my entire life. You already slept with some rich brat like that and you didn't squeeze him for a breakup payout? What, you planning to let him use you for free?" The filth poured out of his mouth like sewage, splashing straight into my ears. As rage surged to my head, a deeper, bitter self-mockery washed over me. Like father, like daughter. This talent for stalking, spying, exploiting others. Hadn't I inherited it too, and used it on Ian? Maybe it really was true. What you fear most is exactly what shows up. When I caught sight of the one person I least wanted to see right now, out of the corner of my eye, I froze, then immediately turned back to Frank and warned him. That's my boss. He's the president of the order. I'm his assistant, of course we work closely. People like him don't deal with our messes. So don't even think about bothering him, or his lawyers will bury you in prison. I kept my face cold as I subtly shook my head at Ian, who was striding toward us from behind Frank. My lips formed a silent command. Go away. What I said was for Frank. But it was also for Ian. Yet Ian didn't slow down. He charged straight forward and shoved Frank hard. The explosive strength honed from years in the gym and on the rowing team tore me free from Frank's grip. The next second, that long, powerful hand closed around mine. Firm. Unyielding. Who the hell are you? Frank shouted, staggering back into balance. Ian's grip tightened slightly. His voice was calm, clear, carrying undeniable authority. Nora's boyfriend. Frank froze, then looked Ian up and down. The tailored suit and the Patek Philippe on his wrist made Frank's expression change instantly. A greasy, greedy smile spread across his face. Oh, so it's you. The money man. Well then, I'm Nora's father. Don't you think you should give me a little something? Call it a fee for raising your girlfriend. Have you no shame? Get lost. I snapped, shaking with fury. How dare you talk to your father like that? Frank's cloudy eyes widened as he raised his hand again, ready to strike. Ian yanked me behind him. His tall frame moved like a wall, completely shielding me. Smack. Frank's palm grazed Ian's jaw. The sharp sound echoed in my ears. Ian turned his head slightly. A red mark bloomed instantly across his pale skin. He didn't even frown. He just looked at Frank. The kind of look you give an insect, one you could crush at any moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but the fury beneath it was barely contained. I'll say my private lawyer's number once. Memorize it. Call him tomorrow. I can give you money. On one condition, you sign a waiver renouncing any claim to property inheritance, and you never appear in front of Nora again. If you so much as take one step closer to her, I guarantee you'll spend the rest of your life on Rikers Island, for trespassing and assault. The moment Frank heard the word money, his eyes lit up. He fumbled out his cracked screen phone and hurriedly typed in the number. Deal. As long as the cash clears, everything's negotiable. I won't bother you lovebirds anymore. Frank whistled, shot us a greasy grin, and swaggered off. Ian watched his retreating back, his chest rising sharply once. He exhaled hard, took my hand, silent, firm, and swiped us into the building. The hallway was narrow, the motion sensor lights flickering on and off. But Ian never let go of my hand. The grip was so tight it felt like if he loosened it even a little, I might dissolve into air. He told me to sit on the couch and wait. When he came back from the bathroom, he was carrying a first aid kit. He knelt in front of me on one knee. Took out an ice pack and ointment, carefully tending to my swollen, burning cheek. Does it hurt? His warm breath brushed my skin. The concern and guilt in his eyes were completely undisguised, weaving a tight net around me. My heart stuttered. I looked away, uneasy, fixing my gaze on a crack in the wall. Deliberately, I changed the subject with a lighter tone. Ian, you're starting to know my place better than your own mansion. You didn't even have to ask, you knew the first aid kit was under the sink. He reached for a cotton swab. Half joking, half serious, he murmured. Yeah. You're always hurting me, after all. I don't just know where the kit is, I know your handcuff key is in the third drawer. As he moved, his shirt sleeve slid up. The faint red marks where metal cuffs had rubbed his wrist were exposed, casually, unintentionally. I gave an awkward laugh, my eyes drifting to the redness on his jaw. Without thinking, I reached out, lightly touching the mark. What about you? I asked softly. Does it hurt? Ian didn't avoid my hand. Instead, he tilted his face and leaned into my palm, almost indulgently. He shook his head, then looked at me with quiet confusion, with scrutiny. Nora, didn't you say you don't have any family left? I paused, then let out a self-mocking huff. Oh. Right. If I had a choice, I'd rather not have a father at all. Silence spread through the small living room. After a moment, Ian spoke, his tone flat, like he was commenting on tomorrow's weather. Nora. Do you want me to take care of this problem for good? My stomach dropped. His goodwill sent a sharp, anxious ache through me. In this twisted relationship, I'd always been the one in control, the one above him, holding his secrets, setting the pace. I enjoyed his forced obedience. Because it let me forget, just for a while, the unbridgeable gap between us. But now, Ian had seen me at my ugliest. And he wanted to use his money and power to step into my mess of a life. The surge of inferiority hit hard, turning into defensive anger. Take care of it how? I sneered, forcing a grin. Crush him with money? Or? I dragged a finger across my throat in an exaggerated gesture. Hire a hitman and kill him? Just as I expected, my question stopped Ian cold. But he only fell silent for a moment before lifting his head. Those deep-set eyes locked onto mine, so serious it was almost frightening. If that's what you want. My heart clenched hard. I reacted on instinct, lifting my foot and giving his shoulder a light, not cruel, not gentle, kick. What, Ian Rothschild, I scoffed, hang around a pervert like me for too long and your head starts going crooked too? I forced down the wild pounding in my chest, that dangerous sense of being tempted by something I shouldn't touch, and let out a tired sigh. Relax. I'm joking. The deed to the apartment still has his name on it. That place is the only thing my grandmother left me. It's my last foothold in this city. My gaze dropped to the glass of water on the coffee table, dark and heavy. Before he signs that waiver giving up his claim, I can't let him disappear. I have to endure it, until I can kick him out of my life for good. Do you think I don't want him dead? I looked up at Ian. Years of resentment and bitterness burned in my eyes. But I don't have money. I don't have power. And I'm not going to ruin my own life for a piece of trash like him. So the only thing I can do, is treat him like he's already dead. I stood up, trying to escape the suffocating weight of the conversation. Before I could take a step, Ian pulled me into his arms. Warmth wrapped around me through the thin fabric of our clothes. That long-forgotten sense of safety, solid, steady, carried the faint scent of cedar. I froze, forgetting to push him away. His voice was gentle, but unshakably firm, flowing straight into my ears and settling deep in my chest. Nora. You don't have to fight alone anymore. I'll stay with you. Until we take back everything that belongs to you. Always. My nose stung. I wanted to push him away, to tell him not to get involved, but he only held me tighter. Fine. I closed my eyes and buried my face against his broad chest, listening to the calm, powerful rhythm of his heartbeat. In quiet surrender, I wrapped my arms around him. Ian. I think I would rather you had stayed that cold, hypocritical, elite bastard. But you're not. You're this good. And that's exactly why. How could I bear to trap you beside someone as dirty and broken as me? The day I decided to let go came sooner than I ever imagined. That night was the Order's weekly meeting. Rain hammered against the windows as Ian stood at the long table, reviewing the budget for the next quarter. Suddenly, a blinding flash of lightning split the sky, followed by a thunderclap so loud it shook the building. The power died instantly. Darkness swallowed the room. What happened? Did the power go out? Why isn't the backup generator on yet? Amid the murmured confusion, I instinctively edged closer to Ian. In the dark, I reached under the table and found his hand. It was ice cold. Damp with sweat. Sensing the warmth of my palm, the rigid tension in his body slowly eased. He tightened his grip instead, fingers locking around mine as if afraid to let go. Ian is afraid of the dark. I'd discovered that by accident, the last time I'd tried to blindfold him with a ribbon just to tease him. His reaction had been violent, he'd nearly knocked over the nightstand. I never asked why a man like him carried something like that from childhood. I'd just quietly tucked that black ribbon into the deepest drawer and never touched it again. A few minutes later, the lights came back on. Before anyone could even adjust, Sean burst in like a stage magician, pushing a cart loaded with expensive whiskey and a cake, singing a wildly off-key birthday song. That was how I found out. It was Ian's birthday. On the drive back, the air in the car felt heavy. Maybe it was the hard liquor he'd had at the gathering. Ian's gaze was hazy, his words looser than usual. "Nora," he asked, turning toward me in the dim backseat light and holding out his hand with a smile, "where's my present?" When I told him I'd give it to him back at the apartment, the anticipation in those deep eyes was obvious, completely unmasked. Back home, I told Ian to close his eyes and led him into the bedroom by the hand. I took out the familiar handcuffs. Click. Almost on instinct, Ian opened his eyes. "Ian," I said softly, "it's your birthday tonight. You make the rules." I tugged lightly on the chain already secured to the metal bar at the head of the bed and looked at him with a half-smile. His pupils shrank, something dark stirring beneath the surface. The Adam's apple hidden by the choker rolled unconsciously. He knelt on one knee on the bed. Just as his fingers were about to reach my waist, he jolted upright again, like he'd touched fire. "It's my birthday, so I'll make that for you," he blurted, avoiding my gaze. "Grilled cheese, right? You said that's all you wanted." He pulled the spare handcuff key from his trouser pocket. As he was about to hand it to me, he hesitated, then tucked it back into his own pocket. "Stay here for a bit. I'll cook first. I'll unlock you after." "Okay." Watching him hurry toward the kitchen, dragging one cuffed hand behind him, still determined to cook. I realized that sometimes, when you're truly speechless, you really do laugh out loud. The best aged cheddar. Bread fried golden and crisp on both sides. And that signature, perfect diagonal cut. Ian's recreation of my grandmother's sandwich was even better than the one in my memory. And knowing I might never get to eat it again. For once, I wiped the plate completely clean, crumbs and all. "Hungry?" he asked gently. With his free hand, he brushed away a bit of bread from the corner of my mouth, the affection in his eyes so thick it nearly drowned me. I hummed softly in response. After setting the plate aside, I took a deep breath and reached into my pocket, pulling out the small, cold object. "Ian. I actually prepared a real gift for you." I placed a small, delicate silver key on the nightstand. Ian recognized it instantly, the key to the choker around his neck. He reflexively touched the leather band. "Didn't I just start wearing this one a few days ago?" he asked. "You bought me another one already?" When I shook my head, his brow furrowed. As if a dangerous realization hit him, his face flushed bright red, his eyes darting away. You didn't actually buy that thing you added to your cart last time, did you?" "Nora, that. I still have meetings at school. If I have to use the restroom?" He glanced downward, trailing off, visibly conflicted. The last time, I'd only joked about getting him a special kind of lock, teasing that I'd make him mine completely. I'd nearly forgotten the joke myself. But this sheltered young heir had clearly remembered it, maybe even replayed the awkward scenario in his head more than once. I wanted to laugh. But the sourness in my chest surged first, like a rising tide, crashing straight through my defenses. "It's not what you're thinking," I said quietly. "There's no new toy." I tugged at the corner of my mouth and looked straight at Ian, trying to carve his face into my memory. Every word that followed carried a seriousness and finality I'd never shown him before. "Ian. Game over. I permanently deleted every single photo from the cloud. So from today on, you're free." The next few days, I moved fast and clean. I submitted my resignation to the order, citing academic pressure. Blocked Ian on every social platform. His number too. I even listed the apartment on a short-term rental site, planning to move to a cheaper neighborhood in Brooklyn. I was decisive. Thorough. Determined to cut myself out of Ian Rothschild's world completely, no loose threads, no traces left behind. What I never could have imagined was that barely a week after I unilaterally ended things with Ian, I would experience a kidnapping straight out of a movie. When consciousness returned, the back of my neck throbbed faintly, the lingering ache of ether. An unfamiliar ceiling. A vintage crystal chandelier. Not a dark basement, but an extravagantly luxurious Baroque-style bedroom. I tried to sit up and heard the sharp clink of metal. Looking down, I saw that my wrists and ankles were restrained by elegant gold chains lined with velvet padding. The other ends were secured to the posts of a massive four-poster bed. My heart dropped. Fear began to spread through my veins. I scanned the room. At the foot of the bed, an entire wall was a massive one-way mirror. But what truly made my skin crawl were the photographs. The walls were covered, floor to ceiling, with pictures of me. Me dozing by a library window. My back under an umbrella on a rainy day. My focused expression picking discounted items at the grocery store. And even photos from when I'd once hidden in the shadows, secretly photographing Ian. Including several shots of me, holding the camera. A chill shot straight up my spine. What was this, karma? The mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind it? When the hell had I become someone's prey? Steady footsteps approached. Muted against the thick carpet. The bedroom door opened. I snapped my head up. A tall figure stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway lights. That silhouette was terrifyingly familiar. Nora, a low voice said, heavy with restraint and something close to madness. Why did you have to force me to do something I didn't want to do? My eyes widened in shock. Impossible. Ian. I stared, unable to believe what I was seeing. He stepped out of the shadows, walking toward me. He was wearing a black silk robe, loosely tied, chest exposed. Long fingers idly toyed with a black choker, one with a small bell attached. As he moved closer, it rang softly. Ding. Clear. Delicate. And enough to drop me straight into ice. That sound. That thing. Ian stopped beside the bed and leaned down. Following my horrified gaze to the choker in his hand, he smiled. Don't remember? The smile held none of his former warmth. Only naked possession. He gave the bell a gentle shake. This was your very first gift to me. Memory slammed back into place. The first time I'd stopped Ian. The box I handed him had contained this exact bell collar. I blurted out, stunned. Didn't you say you threw it away? How could I? Ian laughed softly. It was something you gave me. He knelt onto the mattress, closing in. The cold metal brushed lightly against my sensitive neck. I shuddered. I didn't even get the chance to enjoy it properly. His voice was tender, intimate, like a lover's whisper. And dangerously suffocating. Click. With his own hands, Ian fastened the very gift I'd once forced onto him. Around my neck. Nora, he murmured. You look beautiful. His fingers brushed the golden bell. He flicked it lightly. Ding. Hovering above me, Ian stared down without blinking. The obsession in his eyes, feverish, warped, soaked in something that could only be called love, looked ready to swallow me whole. Ian, stop. A wave of absurdity and fury crashed over me. I went cold and shouted the safe word we had agreed on long ago, the one rule that had always been absolute. Red. Any time that word was spoken, everything was supposed to stop. Immediately. But this time Ian didn't obey. He let out a soft laugh, lowered his head, and closed his lips around my earlobe. The warmth of his tongue sent an uncontrollable shiver through my body. Nora. Game loading. His voice was hypnotic, dangerous, like a siren's song pulling me under. Now, the roles switch. This time, I'm the owner. I never imagined that I would be the one crying, begging Ian Rothschild to stop. But the more I pleaded, the wilder the fire burned in his eyes. Until my unfocused vision could no longer make out the entwined figures reflected in that massive one-way mirror. A sleepless night. When I woke again, it was already past noon. The golden chains on my wrists and ankles were gone. The heavy restraint had vanished, replaced by a deep, aching soreness throughout my body. I turned my head and saw Ian beside me, looking utterly satisfied, propped on one elbow, watching me. That was the moment anger overpowered reason. I shot upright and slapped him hard across the face. "Was this fun for you, Ian? You sick bastard." Ian didn't dodge. He turned his head slightly, pressed his tongue against the reddened mark on his cheek, and smiled. "Nora. I'm sorry." He apologized without the slightest sincerity, reaching for the hand that still tingled from the slap. When he saw my palm flushed red, the amusement in his eyes instantly twisted into something like warped concern. "Did your hand hurt?" He picked up the black leather crop we'd used the night before and placed it into my hand. "If you need to vent, use this. Hit me with it. Don't hurt your hand." Looking at him, so disturbingly proud of himself, the fragmented memories of last night's madness and humiliation began replaying in my head like a broken reel. I turned my face away, tossed the whip aside, and stared blankly at the ornate crystal chandelier overhead. 10 minutes, Ian. If you can't explain what the hell this is, I'm calling the police and letting the Rothschild heir burn. So, in the next 10 minutes, Ian told me the truth about his life. A truth colder than hell. Ian's father, old Mr. Rothschild, was a legendary Wall Street predator. Brilliant. Ruthless. Pathologically controlling. Years ago, he'd set his sights on Ian's mother, a socialite from a declining aristocratic family. Not for love, but because her bloodline and beauty would optimize the Rothschild genetics. To obtain her, he orchestrated a calculated financial siege, driving her family into bankruptcy, pushing her fiancé to suicide. Then, like acquiring a priceless artwork, he married her. From the day Ian was born, he was living proof of her nightmare. Because he looked too much like the man who had destroyed her life, she couldn't face him. She numbed herself with antidepressants and alcohol. And Ian's father had only one expectation of his son: to become a perfect, emotionless heir. Ian was born a prince with a golden spoon in his mouth. A surname everyone envied. What no one knew was that his greatest wish had always been that he'd never been born into this gilded prison at all. When he was 5, he broke a wineglass at a formal dinner. As punishment, his father locked him in a pitch-black wine cellar. An entire night. The only sound was rats gnawing at wooden barrels. From that day on, Ian developed a severe fear of the dark. When he was 8, his mother attempted to harm herself again. His father sent her to an outrageously expensive private institution. On visiting days, Ian discovered something terrifyingly simple. The more perfectly he smiled, the more satisfied his father became. And the less frequently his mother lost control. So he learned the Rothschild smile. He smiled for his father. For the press. For the smug, hypocritical board members. That smile became his best mask. And also his armor. Ian believed he would wear it forever. Rotting slowly in that stagnant, airless swamp. Until the night he met me by the abandoned boathouse. A girl abandoned by her father, who had just lost her grandmother. The moment our eyes met, he saw himself reflected in my tear-blurred gaze. Just as broken. Just as desperate. Yet burning with the same stubborn, defiant fire. He couldn't stop watching me. He saw my background on a financial aid form. Saw me juggling 3 jobs alone. Saw me rushing into the supermarket before closing to grab discounted bread. In Ian's world of lies and performance, I became the only thing that felt real. Later, after that public confession fiasco, he noticed the presence watching him through the narrow gap of the janitor's door. He should have left. Or handled the letter with polished grace. But a deranged thought crossed his mind. If this girl saw my cruel, merciless side, the part no one else ever sees, would she scream and run like everyone else? Or would she see through me? So he dropped the envelope into the trash. And out of the corner of his eye, he caught the flash of a camera lens. The next day, when he realized I'd begun following him, camera in hand, like a clumsy little hunter, for the first time in more than 20 years, Ian felt a violent, soul-shaking joy. He wasn't being hunted. He was being seen. In this rotten, performative world, he and I were kindred spirits. Compared to his obsession, my little schemes were laughably innocent. But since I'd been the one to provoke this mad dog, trying to return him now was clearly too late. I looked into his possessive eyes and sighed. Seems I'll just have to be his owner for life. 2 years later, Ian's mother died in the institution from a drug overdose. For her, it was likely a long overdue release. His father, crushed by years of strain and the loss of his wife, developed severe Alzheimer's and was quietly sidelined by the board. With the family lawyer's help, Ian made a decision that shocked Wall Street. He liquidated most of the family's core assets and placed them into a professionally managed trust. Then he cut off every toxic tie to the Rothschild name. We left the suffocating East Coast world of power and vanity. Moved west, somewhere brighter, freer, more forgiving. We bought a White House by the sea in Malibu and began a kind of voluntary exile. 2 years later, Ian and I got married. No grand spectacle. No century-defining wedding. Just the two of us, barefoot on the beach, exchanging rings under the sun. When his old fraternity friends found out, their group chat exploded, demanding a proper celebration. So we hosted a small private brunch on the terrace of our new home. Years later, friends reunited. Sean led the charge, dragging along the old order crowd, popping bottle after bottle of obscenely expensive champagne. Ian, I knew it back then, Sean laughed, already tipsy. The way you looked at Nora, it was like you wanted to devour her. Never thought you'd actually end up together. This is basically campus legend status now. Laughter rippled around the table, loud and teasing, and even Ian couldn't help curling his lips into a smile. The California sun was brutal, and the alcohol didn't help. Before I could react, Ian casually undid the top 2 buttons of his linen shirt, just trying to cool off. The noise died instantly. Like someone had hit mute. I stared at the black choker around Ian's neck, fully exposed now, gleaming under the sunlight. For one horrifying second, I wanted to dig a hole and crawl straight into it. Guess I really have gotten older, my skin's way thinner than it used to be. Ian, dude, your neck. Sean froze, eyes wide, pointing at him. His champagne flute nearly slipped from his hand. Oh, this? Ian glanced down, completely unfazed. He even hooked a finger under the edge of the choker, tone as calm as if he were discussing tie colors. Marriage compromise. Nora likes it. So I wear it. We were all adults. And with Ian being this open, borderline smug, the initial shock dissolved into a chorus of woes and knowing grins, eyes lighting up with filthy curiosity. Then Sean's mouth fell open again, realization hitting him like lightning. Wait, then that charity gala years ago, the thing that showed on your neck back then, that was this too? Holy shit. That single sentence detonated the entire table. Gossip-hungry gazes snapped onto Ian and me like searchlights. I gave a stiff little laugh, lifted my glass, and used it to shield my face. Under the cover of the tablecloth, my other hand shot out and viciously pinched the inside of Ian's thigh. MMPH. A muffled sound slipped from his lips, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned in, pretending to reach for a napkin, and murmured right into my ear. His warm breath brushed my skin, carrying a warning only I could understand. Easy there, honey. I hid the key. If you can't find it, tonight, you'll just have to put up with a dog and a collar. The realization hit me all at once. This bastard had absolutely undone those buttons on purpose. Fuming, I pinched him again, harder. Ian Rothschild, I hissed, this is a punishment. His Adam's apple rolled sharply beneath the black leather. In those deep eyes, that familiar, sick spark of excitement flashed again. Me. Fuck. I just made this mad dog happy again. The end.